Spider-Man!
Warning. This video contains super awesome content not suitable for people who don't enjoy super awesomeness. Viewer discretion advised.
The Frankenstein monster. We are all familiar with this massively misunderstood medical mistake. But the underlying theme of this cautionary tale provides great insights into the past, present, and future of the medical community and its practices. As with any subject involving humans, we can deduce there are elements of good and evil. The dedicated doctors and nurses that have given over the better part of their lives in the pursuit of good health and the exploration of further advanced medicines and surgical techniques deserve our admiration and thanks. But what about those who blur the lines of acceptable procedures and practices in the name of progress? Their sinister motivations for personal gain or gratification extending deep into the darkness that is the sickness of a corrupted anatomy. It is time we explore how the mysteriously troubling and awe-inspiring history of medicine eventually became the Hippocratic Oath. So welcome, patients. Please hop up on the table and lie down. Count backwards from 30. Pay no mind as we get under the skin, perhaps curdle some blood, and chill you to the bone as we perform a little surgery on this, the next episode of Diabolical.
Welcome, friends, patrons, and party animals, to another episode of Diabolical. Hey folks, we're back for another episode of Spirits Talk with our good buddy Colin. Colin, thanks for popping in. Hello. Oh, it's so good. That's my character, Mr. Colin Fire. Hello. I've been working on it. It's a brewer. It's for sure a brewer. Oh no. Brewer alert. Yeah, I should kick my own ass. I'm kicking my own ass. You're getting your ass kicked right as we speak. So, today's episode is all about, well, this is a weird one. So, we're going to start off with Frankenstein, but we're really here to talk about medical malpractice and medical anomalies and weird medical practices.
Weird experimental medicine.
Yeah, weird experimental medicine. That's what it's really about.
Yeah, we really narrowed that down.
Yeah. Scalpel. All right, so we're here to discuss medical malpractices. But we're going to start everything off with the Frankenstein monster. Because if you ask me, Colin, the Frankenstein monster kind of brought to light the idea of there being, I know it's the mad scientist thing, but the idea of there's doctors out there who maybe don't play by the rules and are willing to go to greater lengths to not only influence the medical community, but to find alternative medicines and practices that might actually help people. But sometimes they have to blur the lines of what's accepted behavior to do so. So, to start things off, real quickly, the Frankenstein monster brought to light by the good old Shelley Winter.
Yes. Jonathan Winter's sister, Shelley Winter.
Shelley Light Winter.
Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley.
In about 1814 or 15 or something like that. Maybe 18.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong here, but I think Mary Shelley was given a lot of flack for that book.
Right.
And it wasn't just because people didn't think it was going to go anywhere. It was because she was a woman and she wrote it.
Yeah, the doctor was a woman. That was 200 years ago. It's mind-blowing.
That's crazy. Thank you, dogs, for yipping and yapping in the background. You hear a little bit of... That's my very stupid puppy.
This is dog experiments.
I don't know why I got two at once.
They're
I'm
cute.
an animal. They are cute as shit. But they were brother and sister. I couldn't let them separate.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. And now they're going to be part of my medical experiment. So, there's the good old fashioned Frankenstein,
Sure.
right? The fire burn, fire
Right.
bad. Right?
Yeah, so I mean, Frankenstein, it came out in a time where people really were doing those experiments. I mean, people were really starting to mess with the idea of using electricity to reanimate corpses. You know, there was the famous experiments they had. I think they called it galvanism, but they would shoot electricity into frogs, so you could have a dead frog lifting weights.
I'm so glad you got that in.
That's for Brian.
Yeah, hey Ryan.
A frog lifts weights.
This way.
Anyway. Well, no, but there was already, that stuff was going on. I mean, they were already, the corpse trade had already been happening at the time. And
Oh, that's a band name right there, the Corpse Trade.
we're in the corpse trade.
What's the name of your band, man? The Corpse Trade.
I'm in the corpse trade.
That's sick.
We play at Jack's Patio Bar every fourth Wednesday.
What kind of music do you play? Country.
It's kind of like a mix between like Stone Temple Pilots and Hall & Oates and
I know every band says this, but we're actually freaking good.
And we're working on an album, and it's about to come out next September.
So be looking out for
We're
it.
gonna have a release party. We were those guys, so that's why we can make fun.
One of the things we did that nobody else did, though, which separated us from the herd, was we sent hate mail, which was actually a great experiment because people ate it up. We got droves of people begging for their next hate mail letter. I don't think we ever did anything else.
The important thing was that it was handwritten with markers
crayons
and
pencils,
markers and crayons. And
while we were out of our minds.
yeah, so it was good stuff. It was stuff along the lines of, Matt, your name sucks. People clean their feet on you, you know.
Please don't come to our concerts, and we've decided not to like you because of your clothes.
Yep. So Cam sucks. You're terrible.
You're an idiot.
We all hate
We don't want you at our
Nobody
shows.
likes you.
Please don't come to our next show at
With
at
the-
this time.
with the date.
Yeah. You're not invited to this show. Don't
Yeah.
bring your friends to this show. It's
And-
really great.
This certificate is good for one free punch to the face.
Yeah.
Redeem it.
We had raffles for you get to take us to McDonald's.
So
And people paid.
that's
They
right.
bought raffle tickets.
They really did. There was nothing else to do in these towns.
Yeah, that's true. I just realized I'm in the town that we were in.
You're back in the town.
I'm back in my hometown, so that's crazy. Okay,
We
Yeah.
digress.
we digress. So, the Frankenstein monster.
But yeah, so when Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, people, doctors were already kind of doing that. They were trying to reanimate corpses. They were using the electricity with dead bodies. Surgery was new in the corpse trade. There was, I read anybody who was like a murderer or someone who was executed was automatically donated to the surgeons.
Really?
And in 1803, there was a guy that they hooked up electrodes to him. I don't know if it was to his nipples or what part of his body. I
Probably
would assume the nipples. If they didn't do the nipples, that's why it didn't work.
Tell me when you've gotten an opportunity to clamp some nipples and you didn't take it.
Yeah, if it's electrodes, they go on the nipples.
Yeah.
For you kids at home. But they did this experiment on this murderer, and the face twitched and, malformed and the eyes opened and stuff, but it was just, electrical impulses shooting through. But people really thought if they just developed the method just a little more, they could bring the bodies back to life. And Mary Shelley was kind of writing in that setting, like, ooh, maybe 20 years in the future, they'll be able to perfect this and bring a body to life. An abnormal brain.
Abby normal.
Abnormal.
abnormal.
So, point being that, yes, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is like a great high point that everybody can point to as far as the mad doctor, the mad surgeon, the mad experimenter, scientist. But that practice was already happening, and that type of weird medicine goes way back.
And that weird medicine, before we get into the weird medicine that occurred from it, what it did though too is it employed the rough elements to go out and find cadavers for these underground doctors that were willing to pay for it. They couldn't get one by normal means.
Yeah.
Abnormal means.
Abnormal. Have you seen the movie Burke and Hare? It's pretty good. Pretty good. Andy Serkis, Simon Pegg. But that's like the most famous, that's one of the most famous cases of the corpse trade. A couple of guys that, they started with vagrants and people who died accidentally, trading them to doctors, to the surgeons who would pay them under the table and act like it was all cool, so they could chop them up. Just pretty morbid. Yeah. But these two guys, the getting was so good that they got to the point where they were actually kind of murdering people and making the buck off of them. So
Afraid of your stuff.
Yeah, it got out of control to the point where they had to make laws against it. But I think it's modern medicine is a beautiful thing, but the early, modern surgery is a very morbid thing, and it took some pretty morbid people to mess around with dead bodies and corpses and stuff to get to that point. So
yeah, it's like CGI. You got to stand on some other people's backs,
right?
Jason the Argonauts brought about Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
So it's not like it just happens. It's got to go through its little horrible, perhaps means to the end.
Ray Harryhausen, he dissected dead pieces of clay for claymation.
Right.
Gumby, he did an autopsy on Gumby.
He did a Gumby autopsy.
Yeah. Anyway.
So what's actually kind of interesting. So again, before we get into all the really weird shit that they did, it's kind of funny to me that all that experimenting and trying things out in a way culminated with the digression in the form of old Western medicine.
As in?
Old Western medicine was pretty rough. In fact,
you're talking about the Old West.
The Old West. Okay. And I'm specifically talking about the time when there was doctors would often quickly go to a possession, some sort of a demonic disorder. A demonic possession was the cause of the disorder. Or some sort of a psychosomatic issue, as opposed to just, or they would go down that rabbit hole, rather than say it was a mental issue where it needed to be figured out or they needed to be talked to a little bit. It was like, well, we got to drill a hole in his head and pop it out and let the brain breathe. And that was a real thing. And I think it was called trepidation. Trepanation. And so there was that, and the point is, there's that funny part in A Million Ways to Die in the West, but Seth MacFarlane actually brings to light a lot of the weird shit that happened back then. Like he goes, oh, what you need is a donkey kicking. There was bloodletting, which was putting a leech on you or literally stabbing a vein.
Right.
And that was cleaning out the blood.
Right. Just led to more death than it did.
Caused more problems than it solved.
Bloodletting was a pretty just amazing, discovery that someone came up with. Yeah. But where did somebody come up with that idea? Did what's her name? Did Elizabeth Bathory, the lady that was always, killing her servants and spraying the blood all over herself? When people hear that story and then think, well, there might be something to it. Let's start poking holes in people and letting the blood out.
Yeah, well, I if I'm going to throw a guesstimation out, we do know that, like in ancient Europe and Egypt, even in Rome, they did a form of what we would call trepanation, but it was actually more precise. And they found, like, I think it was out of like 25,000 bones discovered in those areas in that ancient time, that 4, 5, 6, 7,000 years ago area, that a quarter of all of the skulls found had big holes in them, and there was regrowth of the skull, meaning that had been done and they had lived a while past that being done. A lot of experts will tell you that during that time, life was a little bit more brutal, so there was a lot more bludgeon weapons kind of taking people down, but not out.
Right.
And so the idea of releasing the pressure, the blood pressure, was an actual thing because the brain would swell from being knocked so hard. So that's where I think the bloodletting idea probably spawned from.
Right.
Because if you go from ancient to European experimentation era, which would have been like
1800s.
Yeah, in fact, I think there's a space. We call it the Dark Ages, the kind of disappeared history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a space in there where right up until the end of the 17th century, the first idea was demonic possession. That's what was causing your problem.
I don't know, demon possession. Yep. Oh, clearly.
The devil did it.
I can tell. I've seen this problem.
Yeah, that kind of throws it in there. You're like, well, Lord hates you.
Nobody was probably a trained doctor for the most part.
That's the scariest
It's
part.
just maybe somebody who's a medic.
Actually, you may know this, and I think it's touched upon in the movie Johnny Depp. He's the Barber of Seville.
No, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
That was
It's called Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
So that's it. I'm sorry. I was thinking about my fight. No, barbers were doctors. Barbers, you would go to a barber and you could get a demon thrust out of you. You could get some good old fashioned bloodletting.
Yeah.
You could get a donkey punching, and you could get a shower and a shave,
And then some nice sculpting cream
to go with it for 14 cents.
I'm feeling
That's a
tempted.
damn deal, Bill.
No, that's crazy. And I don't know if barbers were just guys that cut hair first and then everything else just got piled on them, or
They were jack of all trades.
If it went the other direction.
They were actually very well respected.
Right.
In fact, the red and the white on the pole represented blood and bandage.
Oh.
That was one of those weird things that I always thought was something different.
I did hear that bloodletting, they were a lot of it was because there was a belief that you had a certain amount of blood, a certain amount of yellow phlegm, a certain amount of black phlegm, and a certain amount of I don't remember what the other thing was, bile.
Yeah.
And that you got too much blood, you got to let that stuff out and even it out with the phlegm. The fact that they're like, oh yes, you need more phlegm in your day.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's disgusting. I even hate the word phlegm.
You have to ask yourself, okay, it's not like it's okay, there's misinformation, right? But then there's just downright idiocy, and I don't think that those people were stupid.
Right.
I think that they were utterly misinformed and or desperate for some sort of an answer. Desperate, when those surgeries were conducted back in ancient times, one thing they did not have was anesthesia that we know of. So it was pretty much you sat in the chair and they just did stuff.
Bite on this.
Yeah, we don't know though, for real. We really don't know if they had an anesthesia. They haven't found anything that says they did. But
Herb, something that'll put you to sleep.
yeah, there must have been something, like pour some whiskey on it and cut
Yeah.
it. But were there any specific practices in specifically like Europe in the 18th century that just really got up under your skin?
Practices in Europe. Well, I mean, it's actually a huge jump from bloodletting and leeches to let's actually cut the bodies open and look inside. So it gets under my skin just a little bit, and I know that, I know the miracle of modern medicine saves lives. It's saved my loved ones' lives.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that at one point there was, maybe some altruistic people and maybe some really fucked up people that were just kind of cutting bodies left and, cutting them up left and right to see what was going on.
Yeah.
And so you obviously take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
No, I don't know of any specific.
The only thing that comes to mind is like, dissecting the heart to kind of see how it ticks, kind of a part of it. And basically making your way through the body to figure things out. And as they were moving forward, they were coming out with treatments based on a hunch. Right?
Yeah.
Based on, if the A bone connects to the B bone, the C bone connects to the D bone, then obviously if you connect this wire to this wire, that'll take care of that.
And I'm sure there was some really dark stuff in the 1800s, but the ones that I really know of is going on in the 1900s, where some really weird stuff, that is on record and that we remember. So it was the 20th century, early 20th century, when lobotomies became a thing.
Lobotomy. That's a really good one.
That's
so.
terrible.
Yeah. So as the progression was happening, now this would have been 19th century.
The 1900s.
Was it 1900s?
Yeah, it was
the early 1900s.
Early 1900, maybe late 18s, but they were. Yeah, the practice it grew very fast too.
So what makes that one extremely frightening? First, pre-anesthesia. There was no putting you under. And the guy would take a steel rod that he developed, and he would stick it.
Well, even before he had one, he would just use an ice pick.
Yeah, he did. Literally use an ice pick, and he would stick it in the corner of your eye, and push the eyeball over, and push it up into your brain, and literally swash it around a little bit, and then pull it out
to break that little portion of the frontal lobe.
Yeah. And so while I can't give you exact numbers, what I can say is I think he had like a 4 to 12% success rate.
I thought it was like there is a 60% chance that you didn't die, or a 60% chance that you would. It was one or the other.
But then there was the post-traumatic.
Right.
So
4% of them actually were
helped. Everybody else had either died or had real problems.
Rose Kennedy was one of the most famous lobotomies, because I think the story of her was when she was born, she didn't she wasn't pushed out fast enough, and they waited for the doctor. There was a nurse there that could have delivered, but because the doctor had to be a man and that guy took his sweet time, they waited like an hour while Rose Kennedy was in the birth canal lacking oxygen. So she had some issues, but she could have functioned. And this guy, the guy that invented lobotomies, was just a con man. He was just a house that made a lot of money off of this little ice pick with a curved end. But yeah, he performed it on her at the family's request, and she was never functional after that. Because yeah, I don't think just poking around in the brain and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
But how much of medicine has been developed based on? I'm just gonna poke around here or there and see what happens.
It's its own version of the snake oil, which kind of brings me to the idea that, as we did get into the 20th century and 19th centuries, even the 18th century, but we were developing drugs to try to quell headaches and scurvy and arthritis and all these different things. And what's so fascinating is that they would come up with the things that we all know are insane, like mercury. They would prescribed that you just they give you the. I know as a port, like there was mercury, like a huge content of mercury in the vial. It wasn't like you just like took a big dollop of mercury, but it's not far from it.
Just spread a little with your jelly.
And they'd say, this will help you with your whatever, and people would die of mercury poisoning. Their livers would crush.
But it was probably demon possession.
That's probably what started it. But then there was like, maybe people may not know this. Bear. Their first aspirin was a thing that they called, and is famous now, heroin.
Oh.
Just buy a aspirin bottle worth of heroin.
Ooh.
And it was called heroin because they called it, they named it heroin.
Really?
Yeah, and they were actually probably the largest heroin dealer of all
I did
time.
not know Bear was the branded.
Yeah.
They branded the name heroin.
Yeah, it was supposed to fix all kinds of things.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah, it probably did.
Fixed not needing to go to work. And
You were
fixed
asleep.
not
You were
having to get out of
sleeping,
bed.
pooping your pants.
Really? I did not know that Bear did that. I thought you were going to say methamphetamine for sure. 'Cause that was a real popular one
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. When you look at any of that stuff, the cocaine and coke and all those little gems.
When I say like most of the world leaders, especially like during World War II, that were on some sort of methamphetamine,
Right.
some sort of treatment that was their nightly treatment, and methamphetamine's supposed to cause megalomania and extreme ego trips.
Yeah.
And that's great to have a leader of the world taking something that does that.
What you need is some asbestos and a tarot card reading.
Asbestos, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that a treatment at one time?
I don't know if I think it was in some things.
I think at that time they would make cotton candy out of asbestos and give it to children.
Well, actually, believe it or not, the snow in Wizard of Oz, it's just a bunch of asbestos. It was just asbestos.
That's great. I'm sure that didn't itch.
Not didn't cause any problems at all.
Didn't
for
cause
anybody.
any sort of cancer or
Nobody
nothing.
at all.
Yeah, no, but definitely in the 20th century, there's some really freaky acts that happened. It was like in the 1950s when the Russian doctor actually sewed the upper half of a small dog to the back of a large dog and connected all the parts so that the blood could flow and everything else. And this half a dog on top of another dog, they lived for about 3 weeks, and the doctors and nurses fed them and kept them alive. And it's just, and you can go online and see the pictures, the video, the film footage of it. It's pretty creepy that they successfully did it and it lived. And I find that worse than Frankenstein. It's so insane to do that. But then they say, well, but that led to, that study led to the heart transplant being able to be done. And now, I don't know if it's happened yet. There's the Russian doctor who's, there's the guy who's volunteered to have his head transplanted.
Yes. We're talking about it now?
Yes.
Yeah, but that guy's...
Is that over? Did it happen? Did they try it? I don't remember.
I thought that they tried it with a quadriplegic.
Yeah. He volunteered his head, and then I guess they were going to put him onto the body of somebody nice and fit. Have they done that yet?
I want to say it's like, if it hasn't been done yet, it's around the corner. I remember watching a thing on the guy talking about how it was going to be like a 28-hour surgery. He said he seems to be pretty convinced that he can do it.
So, is that right? What's the moral quandary there? Not to get too deep, but should we be trying that shit?
Well, it's like, I don't know. I don't think it's anything. I don't think it's different than organ donation.
Transplant.
If a guy dies and his body still works, and another guy's alive and his head only works, and you can do it for the guy, and you can have a working body. I mean, I don't personally have a problem.
So if somebody gets killed in a car wreck and they're a dom donor, then I can finally have a decent one transplant.
You can graduate to 12-year-old boy. Yes.
Well, that's great. Would you like to donate? That's beautiful. See?
If anyone's willing to donate their better penis to Colin, Colin would surely appreciate that.
Click the link.
Click the link down. Click the dink link down below.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Well, yeah. Now, I mean, we can get into the morality of it, obviously, but the results of it are great. You know, heart transplants, organ transplants, all that, saving people's lives, leading to better medicine. But sometimes that exploratory surgery experimentation just goes way off the rails.
Agreed.
And some really bad people can get a hold of it. Need we mention he will not be named?
You mean Joseph
Mengele? Yeah, the stuff that he did was just, I mean, he was a serial killer in a lot of ways, but he was with an extra layer of experimentation, plus being sanctioned.
Yeah, it's like you're not a serial killer if you're a lab coat.
Right.
Oh no, you're cool.
Yeah. Well, and he's getting paid.
Come on in.
So you can blame the
We have a
company.
table right here for you, sir.
I was getting a paycheck and blame the company. But no, he was obsessed with twins, so he could have a control group. So he'd test something on the one and then see what happened to the other, he would test chemicals, he was like injecting dye into the eyeballs of kids. He's like, I wonder if I can turn this kid's brown eyes blue. And that's all. Oh, make my brown eyes.
Yeah.
Blue. Sorry.
I never thought of that as a Joseph Mengele reference, but I guess it is.
Dude, that's pretty
frightening.
disgusting. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, having the ironic song to the movie scene. That would make a pretty mortifying movie scene. But no, he would inject dye into the kids' eyes, and of course they would get infected, and either die or be going so poorly that they'd end up putting the kid to death, and then they would kill the twin who was fine, but then they could cut them both open and see how their insides were different after the experiments. But then they were doing stuff like trying to, chop off half of a person and sew the other half together, and just all this disgusting stuff that this morbid curiosity that leads to some of these crazy surgeries, that's like the end of that road where that path can lead.
I think if I have a moral
Declination.
It's
not a word.
If I have a problem with I think one of my biggest problems with that Frankenstein type of medicine, it's the splicing humans with animals.
Ooh, that's a good
thing.
That's a crazy.
There are people that are saying, but if we put this DNA and this DNA together, we can get a heart out of it, and we can get a this out of it. But it's like, I'm pretty sure that behind closed doors, there's some weird shit going on, and that's where it really starts to get into it's ethically and morally, it's off.
Well, I mean, yeah, recently they've been able to mix rabbit DNA and human DNA and actually allow the cells to multiply and they can survive together. Mm-hmm. So you could create a Jackrabbit Man or some sort of other superhero. I mean, they're doing it, but
they just came out with a movie about that.
What's that?
You know how in our culture, it's definitely I think you can definitely trace back that a lot of things that we find passe and normal now were shocking at some point way back when, like the first toilet flushing on air was a big deal, right? Like you had to be introduced to it.
That's disgusting.
It's like we were so messed up, and then we went to perfect little angels. And then nobody knows anything about anybody that does things. And what? No one sleeps in the same bed. No one flushes toilets in real life. And then now that's all so
yeah,
they
flush the toilet all the time.
Yeah.
My toilet's in my living room. What do you think?
I've got 3 toilets in the living room. But what I'm saying is that culturally, as we progress, they've introduced new elements over and over again, almost as if it's a little red flag going up to say, hey, you should be more okay with this. Hey, you should be more okay with this. Hey, you should be more okay with this. So there's a new mini-series out about gene-spliced, half human, half animals, and they present it with like this cute little half deer, half little boy that's running for his life, and you know the powers, you know, and it's only the evil Christian people that want to get the half boy, half deer because they're the evil Christian people. Maybe they have a point. I'm not saying that you go around killing people or nothing, but
shouldn't murder the half boy.
Don't murder the half breed, but at the same time, don't create the half breed.
Yeah.
In the same breath, I think is a fair statement.
Yeah, I mean that, and none of that might be possible. We might be doing the same thing that Mary Shelley did when, you know, they were watching pseudoscience of electricity causing eyes to twitch on a dead body, and when she wrote Frankenstein, she extrapolated that to, well, we can do this now, so, you know, all it's going to take is 20 years or 30 years, and clearly there's just going to be Frankensteins walking all over England.
Yeah.
But, and so we might be taking one little experiment where they dropped some rabbit DNA and some human DNA, and it didn't immediately explode, and being like, we'll give it 20 years, and
we'll have them run
we're
around.
going to have human rabbits jumping all over the place. It's going to be great.
Yeah, everyone will be a Jackman. Everyone will be a huge Jackman.
A huge Jackman.
Huge Jackman.
Well, I like the idea of, you know, if you've ever heard that theory, how, you know, old mythological beasts that were half man, half, you know, a minotaur, a centaur,
right,
or half this animal, half that animal.
Yeah.
The idea that maybe, you know, ancient beings were experimenting with technology that humans didn't have and splicing together. So a centaur, you know, torso man with a horse butt. You know,
right,
they wanted a man's brain and they wanted a horse's body so it could do the work. Although, you know, I don't believe that was real, because I had a really cool explanation taught to me of what centaurs were. They were actually the Persians. When the Greeks and the Persians were fighting in the Persian War, the Persians would ride up on their horses, shooting their bows. Then they would flip around, the horse would be going back that way, and the Persian would turn around backwards on the horse. As the horse rode away, they were still shooting their bows, so they could get out of range. So it was a half man, half beast, and that was the centaur. So
that's pretty cool.
yeah, that one makes sense. That's not demon possession.
Yeah.
It's not ancient astronaut theorists.
It's perception. It's perception.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, you said Persian, so perception, Persianception. No. So it is, it's perception as opposed to
Something
not deception.
Something
Something
that
else
is
deception.
made up and redonkulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And that's the other thing is, so on top of the medical community basically trying to come up with stuff and basically just crashing and burning in a million different directions as they did so, on top of all that, there were just apothecaries and soothsayers and gypsies just flat out. It's like in A Million Ways to Die in the West, he walks up to some guy who's trying to sell him some elixir.
yeah.
He's like, buy my elixir, it'll cures what ails you. And he reads the ingredients and it's like flannel. He's like, are you telling me this has shirt in it? He's like, yeah, the best shirt. And so it's like, they were just people out to try to make a buck.
Yeah.
You know? And so some weird shit that actually ended up hurting people and killing people was just a guy roaming around in a wagon that put some mercury and some asbestos and some water and some Kool-Aid in a freaking vial and sold it for $25 as a headache medicine. You know?
Well, yeah, and I mean that hasn't gone away. I mean, what happened to HGH? Remember, it was the most popular thing, human growth hormone, that was so popular in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Human growth hormone. You could hear about it all over TV and the radio. All kinds of celebrities took it. It was almost like it was organic steroids, I guess, for lack of a better term. But a lot of big celebrities swore by it because it would make them look younger and feel better. And then at some point, I don't know if it was
did that become
Food and Drug Administration or somebody came along and was like, actually, you can't just sell human growth hormone on the open market. We don't even know what this is doing. It's killing you.
Well, it's like, there was actually a time, and I know for a fact it was going on in the 50s for sure. Doctors would prescribe cigarettes. Oh, how many cigarettes you smoke in a day? 12? You need to smoke at least 24.
Yeah,
it's true.
The rationale being what? It forces you to breathe.
Yeah, like you need more. You need more in your. It causes your lungs to expand.
You need the heat in your lungs.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a little demon right here in your left lung. But you inhale, and that'll cause the demon to jump to your right lung. And then if you smoke 3 more cigarettes and take this cocaine.
Yeah, so like the doctors were the solution and the problem at the same time. But that's the progression of things,
But we say all this, it sounds like we're just shitting on medicine, period.
We're not.
I mean, there's so many amazing things about
Yeah, it's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's when you marry the guy that was legit trying to make things better and figure things out, and then the wingnuts that were kind of throwing a wrench into all of his work and kind of tearing down his work.
It's pretty amazing that medicine has even been able to progress with some of
working
the
against each
same
other.
things that people are doing. But I don't know. I guess if you just, if you were to give the wrong guy unlimited funds and just leave him alone in a room with as many cadavers or, people that have been deemed expendable, there's just no end to what kind of sick things they can come up with. But why not just find out what ailment some of those people have and then maybe try to fix that?
Well, one of my favorite, just misguided doctor type dude trying was Kellogg.
Oh.
So there's a movie about it. It's with Matthew Broderick and Anthony Hopkins.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
No.
It's all about Mr. Kellogg. And so he ran this complex where people went and he would do everything from slapping them with hams, whatever it was. I mean, just weird, like different kinds of, for lack of a better, I can't remember everything. So like, his own versions of like acupuncture and like steam baths but like to the extreme, you're sweating it out. Which he may have been on to something,
right? But
he was going to the extreme, And then he had all these. You would sit down to eat, and it would be like a piece of granola and a part of a piece of grass, and like these weird things. And so you would kind of go, the road to Wellville. So,
okay.
So while Kellogg, this is the best part. Kellogg had all these crazy ideas about health, and I don't think he killed anybody, but he did. He might have even maimed a few people. I don't know, but he had these crazy ideas, and some of it was headed down the right path, but he'd just gone overboard with it. Incidentally, he's in front of a large group of people, and he's talking about how healthy he is, and how smart he is, and how great his medical ideas are, and how it can save everybody's lives. And He gives this great speech. He goes to the end of a diving board, and he jumps off of the diving board, and he has a heart attack before he hits the water. He's dead before he hits the water.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's terrible. But
Yeah. But it goes
so ironic.
It goes along with the idea that, sometimes the human body just doesn't react the same way to everything. It's like there are people that were jogged every morning and died at 25 years old. And there are people that sat on their ass with potato chips and soda and lived to be 82.
Of course, yeah.
There's people that smoked and died at 50, and there's guys that smoked until they were 95 and died of heart disease and had nothing to do with the cigarette.
Different bodies react differently to things.
Yeah, so I think maybe the big problem with the progression of the medical community was that everyone's going to react the same way.
One size fits all type idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it seems like we've definitely found progress beyond that. And at least you got the frosted flake out of it.
You got the frosted flake, and at least there was a separation between physical and mental.
That does kind of
more clear cut.
Disgust me that as a child, Kellogg's was just cereal. But there was all this other weirdness behind it. I mean, it doesn't sound all that bad, but just weird.
Yeah, he would definitely feed his minions cornflakes.
Have cornflakes.
What you need is cornflakes and a back slapper.
with a ham.
Yeah, with whatever.
Let me slap you in the back with a full ham, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
That was pre-scientific method, so. It does seem it was pretty much just, well, I guess just slap him upside the head and see if he feels better. And if not, he's a demon now. And with being able to try things, but actually record them, and maybe use a little more caution, maybe have, there's definitely a lot of ethics. I mean, you talked about the idea of malpractice. Nowadays, malpractice means there's definitely a more litigious.
You left some scissors in the guy.
It's a more legal type connotation nowadays. That malpractice, a lot of times it is, trying to make a buck too fast or something.
Yeah.
And that's a lot different than sewing people together. And the fact that so much of this that we're talking about, some of the weirder stuff, maybe before the 20th century, was just done by random people that just had an interest and maybe had the resources.
Yeah.
So that's pretty frightening.
Yeah, it's I think probably the thing that sticks out to me the most is that the human species was probably better off medically in the ancient world than it was in the modern world, at least specifically if you look at the I'd say 10th century up to the 20th century, we were still kind of feeling our way through.
Why do you say that? Oh, you mean during that window when we were just
it's almost like when the ancient world died,
right?
And we went through, I guess I'm going to say, the Dark Ages and came out that other end. Whatever happened there, it's almost like we started from ground zero, and now it was just a bunch of random trial and error and even just plain out nonsense and human deviancy, all morphed into the medical world that we now know.
Yeah, deviancy. I'm calling out you pediatricians. I know you got into it to hit kids in the knee with a rubber hammer. That was the whole point.
You just wanted to hit people in the knee with a rubber hammer. That's what it's all about.
That was always the one of the hallmarks of getting a physical exam as a child.
Yeah.
Dink.
Yeah.
And what did that do?
Yeah. But that brings one more thing to point is the let's go to modern medicine and even ancient medicine and the subcategory between medicine in each place. I can say that Eastern medicine would be quite different from Western medicine, and I know now it's all married up and everything, but as far back as even 30, 40 years ago, Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things in Eastern medicine that aren't great, which is, ginseng and, herbs and herbology and those things. Homeopathic, more of a homeopathic method isn't fine and good. It has its place, but we all of the cultures of the world all kind of came together that, okay, this is sort of, all right, we can all kind of come to an agreement that this is probably the sphere we should probably hang out in, as far as our definitive scope of what's acceptable medicine.
Right.
But it's still got its own little trials and errors.
Oh yeah.
And it's still got its own little mistakes and things that don't work and misdiagnoses.
Right.
So yeah, there's still going to be problems. There's still going to be mistakes and stuff like that. But I think the nice thing about where we are now is that we have graduated to a common worldwide practice of medicine. And while we can all deviate into some of the more homeopathic remedies and go buy a thing of niacin that might help you with jitters or something like that, it exists and it's around. But you're probably not going to go to HEB and get some asbestos and mercury in a bottle. So
some heroin over the counter.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's self-medicating.
Yeah.
Through things like alcohol and weed and cocaine and all that stuff.
Right.
So we're all guilty of that. So there's a little bit of that element in the progression of medicine, because it's not like just a medical doctor was trying things and selling stuff. It was also like people going, give me some of
Just anything.
that thing. Like heroin was popular for a reason.
Right. And opioids.
Yeah.
The epidemic.
Yeah.
Happened for a reason.
Yeah.
There are definitely
people
people definitely took an opportunity based on that people want to use it, but it also has had its appeal clearly. But so if medicine has its ethical community and it's made all this progress, but there's still so much to learn. So what's the version of Frankenstein now that we could dream up? What would that be?
I think that's the DNA splicing and or injecting DNA altering substances into it.
Well, because Frankenstein became a monster. Frankenstein's monster became a horror ideal. Even though it was more of a social commentary type story, it became this horror ideal because there's just this clear, dark element to it. That it's bad, it's wrong, it's unnatural. Right? So, and it literally is the story of, that science and almost, getting what you wish for. The doctor wished for the ability to bring a body back from the dead, and then it ended up, I think, his own kid gets killed in the book, and a bunch of people get murdered by the monster.
So good intentions that had a negative effect.
Yeah.
It came from a good place, but it went south. But then you throw in that some people are just freaking wacko.
But isn't that the trope of the mad scientist? Is where you have your ethical community that goes, whoa, let's not go too far with this. Let's take baby steps. Maybe not our generation, maybe the next one or the next one. We can, we could work with stem cells and really develop, ways to actually all the good things that you can do with it to help people with, organ transplants or whatever. But if you have someone who's the mad scientist who's like, no, we're not stopping. We have to do it now, and we just have to push through. And that's what always results in some horrible catastrophe. And if they're, the talented mad scientist, they can, in the trope, and get it to work. But then there's all the negative connotations of what would happen.
I think the evolution of it has changed from what they were doing, which is figuring things out, to now it's not, I'm going to try to reanimate a hand or a head. Now it's about, and this is just the sad reality and truth of the evolution of humanity, is control. it is going to bubble to the surface in the form of controlling the population, and that's the sad truth when we're specifically talking about the malpractice of medicine, not medicine in and of itself, but the malpractice of medicine. It is not now about saving a life. It is not now about progressing medically. Now it's about, we have gotten to the place where we can control the masses.
You say control because the technology exists, the ability to help someone is right there, but the prices can be so exorbitant that people have to beg for it. They have to submit to whatever to be able to get.
Yeah,
the
either
medical thing
you're
they need.
ousted, you know, the sheeple thing is a true thing, and interestingly enough, in the Bible, lepers. So if you were a leper, you were ousted. You were put into a colony. You were on the outskirts. You had to announce yourself so that people knew to stay away from you. And that idea of people being sent away and not being allowed to be a human being anymore would definitely give the power to the idea that if you want to be a part of the group now, you must undergo this. You must be a part of this medical thing that we're doing. And if you're not, you don't get to participate in normal life anymore. And that is a power move. And I'm just saying, I think that's where the world is headed. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow or today, or it isn't happening now. It might be happening right now. It might not be happening right now. It might happen 50 years from now. The point is, that is the progression of the sick, demented mentality of the big guys, the top tiers.
But I think that's a political move using the mad scientist. But the mad scientist does his own, or the mad doctor, he dreams up the things that he's gonna do, and he gets to practice the weird shit that he wants to do.
Well, somebody's got to fund him. Somebody's got to give him the advice. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Well, and maybe sometimes it's like, I mean, Mingala didn't really have anybody telling him what all he was supposed to do was try to make everybody the same phenotype. Like, how can everybody have the same appearance? And he just messed around on the surface of the way people looked to try and develop this method where you could force everybody to look the same.
So kind of like when I went to work at Dunkin' Donuts, but I was writing screenplays between baking,
As in,
and glazing.
you were kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah, I was doing my own thing at work.
Well, but so kind of, I mean, his overall task was figure out how to make all humankind look exactly the same.
Right.
And then within that little window,
Yeah.
he did,
Unspeakable, terrible
sewing people together and, all that shit that I talked about. So, I mean, as far as what you're talking about with the government controlling the population, and if you try to marry that up with the idea of DNA splicing and whatnot, so what you're saying that you would try to get the population to have their DNA altered so you could just inject turtle DNA into all the people in a certain population so they'll be slower, and then you can really control them, that type of thing?
Well, if you think about it, really think about it. What is the motivation for someone to be a billionaire? What is the motivation for someone to be in power, to have power?
Right.
What is their motivation? It's a little bit of, I would say, ego, real nutsy, crazy ego. But it's like, I always think to myself, when someone is just power and money hungry, and that's just I know it's a human, I'm going to say flaw.
Right.
The flaw in humanity that you need power and money to be bigger, better, badder, and more important.
I see it as people want money so that they can manipulate things. They can have things, they can get things, they can do what they want with things.
Right.
And then the next step above that is power. You've got all the money, you've got all the things, that's boring. Now you need to start manipulating people.
Right. And what always kind of blows my mind about the idea of it, personally, is the idea that none of us are going to live forever. I don't get, and I don't personally get. I don't have an understanding of why it's so important to be able to lord over people. But there is a selection, a group of people in this world, and they might be a mechanic, they might be a politician, they might be a priest. But there are people in this world that, for some reason, they're really interested in the power, the manipulation, the money that comes from being on top of the herd. And those are the people that when it's available and the time comes and all of the I's are crossed and the T's are dotted, that the next progression for those people is absolute control. I mean, without getting all political and stuff like that, there's a reason why things like the New World Order kind of hover around in the ether. We've all heard of that term and stuff. Yeah. The idea of the dystopian future where we're all just, push down minions of the guys on top.
We're 1984 and we all stand in line.
Yeah, and I think that there's a pretty obvious progression towards some sort of version of that. I'm not saying that some guys on top's gonna be like, kill them all, or give them all this. I'm not saying that, but then again, it does seem the natural evolution of the sickness that is power and money, greed and power. I mean, that just seems the natural progression.
Well,
and it's always existed.
Well, so tying it back, Frankenstein also had the idea of the story is a little bit of playing God.
Yeah.
And that when you play God,
exactly,
bad things happen. Mm-hmm. That's what you shouldn't do. And when you do play God, it's going to blow up in your face. Yeah. And so I guess what you're talking about is, instead of one mad scientist playing God and creating this monster that spins out of control and the monster kills a bunch of people and he eventually dies, you'd have this group,
the linked powers that be on top,
that are able
for global domination.
Mortimer and what's his name from Trading Places.
Yes. So not the microcosm.
The usual amount, $1.
$1. Yeah, I mean, Pol Pot, Hitler, guys like that. They were all about world domination and absolute power.
Right.
Those guys not only did exist all through history, they still exist today. Right. There are versions of them now. Maybe they don't get away with as much as they did before because the world is a little bit more policed, but then again, it's still happening, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point in our not too distant future, the 10 top dogs got together and said, here's what we're doing, and they, meaning us regular people, are going to do as they're told, and if they don't...
Yep. Well, and I also think the Frankenstein story is about class, because you have a little bit higher social class, the doctor himself and the group he runs with, and the monster kind of represents just
the dirty peasants. And
he's nobody. He's got no name. He's pieced together from a bunch of different things, which that kind of brings me to another point I wanted to make. Is like, honestly, we're all a bunch of Frankensteins, because we're pieced together from, our dead ancestors, and we're walking reanimated. I got, my granddad's nose, and I got, my great grandma's ears,
and your aunt's penis.
my great auntie Mabel's penis.
She had quite the large.
That's why I need a donation. www.donateyourpenis.colin.www.http.
We're going to be coming out with a line of t-shirts, and that'll be one of them.
Well, no, but my point was, while my synapses are firing,
Mm-hmm.
with it being about class, the Frankenstein story, it might have a little bit to do with the idea of people that are, not of one specific breed, not of one specific ethnicity, not not purebred.
It'll be global.
Well, I'm saying the Frankenstein monster in the book. He's not like the purebred, upper class,
Right.
or I can trace my lineage back to the very beginning, and it's a very purebred, and then this is just a bunch of different people pieced together.
Yeah.
And so that is clearly the class distinction. So if you fast forward it onto your story, or on what you were talking about just now, you do have a class kind of warfare, because you have the class of those that are in power because they choose to have it by most likely being willing to do terrible things. I think a lot of times is what it is, or just getting a kick out of being able to go over there.
Yeah,
and then thousands of people die.
I mean, it's pretty true. I think it's true, and it's an observable truth that the middle class, so to speak, is shrinking, and the rich and the poor is growing.
Right.
The line is getting thinner and thinner.
Right.
And what you were saying made me want to say this.
Yeah.
If we look at ourselves as modern Homo sapiens running around, we're basically copies of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. We're the Xerox copy of a Xerox copy of a Xerox copy. So the interesting truth of the matter is that our ancestors, ancient ancestors, were in every way superior to us. It's funny that we try to look back at a caveman and go, he was a big dummy, he didn't even know how to use a wheel yet, he was just learning what fire was. They were hyper intelligent, they were extremely strong and powerful. I'm not saying that they didn't die from a disease that would wipe them out because they had no way out. I'm not saying that their teeth couldn't grow wrong and cause a sepsis or something and kill them. But what I'm saying is they were on a whole nother level. Their bones were stronger. Their structure was thicker. Maybe they were hairier or whatever you want to say about them, but they were a bigger, badder specimen. And the progression of us is, you could say, it's like, how beautiful might a woman have been, or how handsome might a man have been 15,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago? When you look by today's standards, you go, man, that is a beautiful woman over there. That is a very handsome man over there. Man, look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, how powerful and built and everything. We've learned things to get the most out of the bodies that we have. Our bodies have also evolved based on what keeps you in the gene pool, right? Not to mention, we also have body modification. And if you ask me, that's probably the closest thing to medical malpractice that we have, because it does say, if you don't like who you are, change it. And
So plastic surgery, you mean?
yeah, and I'm not saying that it's not okay to want to get something fixed. I understand. Maybe you did get your grandfather's nose, and it's like this, or maybe you have a tumor. I understand that, but it's a fine line between, we can fix that and I want to look like Barbie.
Yeah, right.
And somebody going into like spending $200,000 to modify themselves to look like a horse or a tiger or a Barbie, whatever it is.
There's some weird ones.
Yeah.
With the modifications.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a place where that medical malpractice line is sort of skewed, because the doctor's being paid to do something that isn't technically wrong, but at the same time, it's kind of technically wrong. Like, you should probably just say, no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I am not going to turn you into like the guy that, he changed himself into a tiger. Okay? He ended up committing suicide. He spent his whole life wanting to be a tiger. That's what he wanted out of life. So he spent every penny and dime he had into modifying his body as much as he could, from, whiskers and all these things and tattoos and eyes, and he did all this stuff to himself to make himself look like a tiger, and it didn't fix the situation. He was still a mess inside. And I guess I'm just saying that sometimes the physical and the mental don't necessarily marry up so great, but the nice thing about where we're coming to, or where we came to in the medical world, was that there is a distinction between you've got something wrong with you physically, we're going to try to fix that, and this is something that's up in here and we got to work on that side of it. Right. So at least we've come to that. So if there is a silver lining, it's that, you know, maybe we're not just a bunch of heathens running around trying to take over the world and destroy the human genome. You know, maybe there is some actual fair progression. I hate the idea of thinking that it's natural that the deviancy of humankind is going to rear its ugly head at some point.
I just feel like the deviancy of humankind is always on display.
Well, it is. I'm just saying the progression is it's going to probably get worse rather than better.
Yeah, which, I mean, I don't know how much harm, people getting their lips to look like fucking duck lips. And
yeah, I'm not calling that guy. I'm not calling somebody out that just, like I said, wants, you know, really good.
No, I mean, even the weird ones. Even somebody, getting horns put on. The tongue.
If that makes you happy, then go for it.
Yeah.
I don't care. And I don't personally care.
I don't know that, I mean, is that really going to multiply? Is the number of people doing that really going to multiply going in the future? Is it a fad?
It's like, okay, the perfect example, honestly, is probably the breast implant. So women wanted to have bigger breasts, fine. But the guys that were... No,
I guess it's fine.
I'm going to let it go this time. No, but the guys that were developing those solutions that were going into the bags that they were using silicone. All these different things that were causing problems for those women later on in life, and some of them even died from it. So the point is, it's like when you buy a PlayStation 1, the first version of it just wasn't really all that great, but it was so much better than what you're used to. Right. But it's gonna crash and burn, and thank God the PlayStation 2 is coming out soon. So it's like, when you're at the forefront of these medical progressions, you're kind of throwing yourself into a swamp, and you don't really know where what side you're gonna come out of.
As the guinea pig for it, you mean?
Yeah.
It could be very
dangerous waters to swim through, I think.
It could be very dangerous.
Yeah, and so a lot of people have swum through those waters, and I would like to think that a doctor would go, maybe not yet. You know, I'm not ready to just throw this into a human, and I hope it goes well. But that element too often gets passed over, especially in the name of progression medically, or as in I'm getting paid for it, or in I have a problem, you have a solution, and I'll take it even if it ain't ready yet. I'll take what you got now. Right. I want so badly to be different than I am now. I'll take what you got. And the doctor not going, it's not ready yet. The doctor going, how much you ready for that?
Yeah. Here, eat this silver liquid.
And for the 100 ethical, no, it's just not ready yet, guys. There's one guy that's like, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Fine, fuck it.
That's the problem. It's just that humans are flawed, and there's always the bad guy.
So, all right, no, I agree. So what I'm thinking is, I want us to write the new Frankenstein based on what we've just talked about.
Okay.
So it's not a mad scientist in a lab. Mm-hmm. It's a government lab, or even a corporate.
So you're talking like a regular dude that works for a government lab?
Well, no, I'm saying like you were talking about, the group in power.
Okay.
So you got your oligarchs. They get together. They make this agreement. All right, if we pour all of our money into medicine, we can create some sort of method to what? Distinguish. We can become gods, right? Mm-hmm. That is the Frankenstein idea. Become a god. That's why you mess around with the human body, because you're like God. It's almost like a serial killer.
Yeah.
You do it for the same reason all the time. So you feel like a god above normal humans.
Yeah.
And so you have these oligarchs. They're gonna what? Are they gonna create a monster? Or the monster's gonna be a little nanobot?
It could be, but my thought it would happen under the guise and in the name of purity. Natural purity.
Okay.
The most perfect, cleanest race. Like Hitler did.
Acai berries.
It was all about you've seen those structures, I forget what they're called. There's the 4 structures all about basically it goes down the line of how there's too many people basically in the world and here's how we should get rid of them and that we need to decrease. No.
This is modern.
There is a massive structure with a rules of the oligarchy and how they get to the perfect utopian world, and it basically starts with you decrease the global population by a massive amount because all of us are causing the problem. We're killing the planet, and in order to bring back restore the planet and bring back the most perfect world, all of us really rich, wealthy guys need to kill and get rid of all of the stupid poor people and stupid middle class so that all of us rich, wealthy people have the most perfectly clean air and the nice, perfectly clean water, and we'll have the great world that we always wanted, and everybody else can just pay the price that they pay based on where they are.
Which proves that these oligarchs are not smarter than anybody if their big invention is just kill everybody around you.
That's all they gotta do.
That's what everybody's always done. They're like, if there just wouldn't be these fucking people around.
Yeah, when you look through history, that's what they did.
Yeah, everybody
from Vlad the Impaler to Hitler and Pol Pot and all these jackasses.
To the United States and the indigenous. Like,
trying to keep it out. Yeah, I mean, we saw genocidal warfare recently. Right. Like in the last 2 years, we saw that. I think it was in Syria, wasn't it? Where they fought with like gas and stuff like that, and they killed their own people and stuff.
No,
it's happened in Iraq. It's happened in places. Genocide.
Rwanda. What was the other one?
Cambodia.
Somalia. Yeah.
Genocide is a real thing, and you can say what you want, but I can pretty much guarantee you it wasn't Pol Pot's cousin that told him to go and kill a bunch of people. Pol Pot set it in order, and that was it. Yeah. And it's so weird to me, the whole kings and queens and the monarchy.
Right.
The idea of somebody being on top and being able to say to everyone, this is what's going to happen, and everyone just does that is really freaking weird.
Well, I agree with you, and to build on that real quick, I think it's really weird that one person can just say and can be done,
and that's the norm.
Organizes everything. I think it's really weird that a capital palace can be stormed, overtaken, and then just suddenly whoever took that over, they're in charge.
Yeah,
it's weird to me. I know it's
there's
because,
no progression at all.
I know it's because that's a symbol that indicates also the street in front of it is taken. Also, all the streets around it are taken. Also, the neighborhood around it is taken. Also, pretty much the whole city around that palace is taken.
Yeah.
But you hear, yep, they took the palace. It's like, well, that doesn't mean that they get to fucking decide what people do. But and it's the same thing with like a king or a queen just being in charge.
Yeah.
But when really the royalty, and I know this only by watching movies and television.
I saw the Tudors.
But it seems like it's all farmers, or ranchers, people with land that just go and just fucking kill another guy who has some land. And the ones that are willing to go kill,
get the land.
And then if they'll manipulate, whatever. But eventually it always comes down to they'll make their little rules and have their discussions and yes, I go by that rule. But then when you decide you're going to just turn and fucking kill somebody and take their land, it's like, well, rules are out the window.
I killed a family of 9, but I own 7 more acres, so shut up, Tim.
I mean,
you know what's actually kind of that spurs me into thinking about, which is kind of an interesting thing, is like somebody like who was the guy? I just can't think of his name. No. The drug cartel leader in Mexico.
El Chapo?
Yes. He's a really good example
Don't
of
kill me.
Yeah. So what he did was, okay, he was a tyrant, right? He was what you would call totalitarian, okay?
Right.
You do as you're told, and if you don't, and you don't do it the way I want it to be done, you will die for it. And so he created a kingdom for himself. But what was interesting about him was that he did all this stuff to help the surrounding communities.
Right.
He was a huge he was a philanthropist.
Yeah.
Okay, now there's the side of it was keeping the people on his side.
Right.
But there was also the, if I surround myself with the best of what the community has to offer, and I give the community the best of what there is to progress the community around me, then I'm in a better position and my kingdom is in a better position.
Right.
And what's so weird about that is you're talking about someone that would be definitely considered a low, scum of the earth and everything. Yes, and he was, but at the same time, he was also acting in some ways better than some top of the hill.
Yeah, how does he look from the inside? How does he look when you're there in that community and things were shit, and suddenly the so-called, drug monster, drug lord, terrible guy, when he takes over the power through whatever means necessary, but everything around you improves and everybody around you is happier.
It's kind of weird, right? I'm not saying he didn't do terrible things. I know he did.
But I know that happens a lot. I mean, like terrorist groups, even gangs, stuff like that. But maybe the idea is, do some underhanded shit and eventually get to the point where you are legitimate, which it happens all the time. It's happened all the time throughout history.
Right.
Like underhanded groups. Anyway.
So are you basically coming from the idea that you do what you got to do to get to cultural perfection at the top?
I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that it happens all the time and it is very much dismissed and allowed. Absolutely.
There were people in absolute power that didn't let it go with their head. There were people in absolute power that did a great job economically or whatever. And there were people in power that did or didn't do all those things. And then you add in the element just plain out, just human, sinister ideals and shoving it in to the culture and everyone around them and making it be part of who the world. And if you didn't follow their rules, you were ousted or you were killed for it. I don't know how I don't know where that comes. I don't know what that brings to the table, except to say that it's funny how by allowing the medical community to dive into muddy waters in order to progress modern medicine, and all of the toes that had to be stepped on, and all of the bodies that had to be dug up, and all of the peasants that were killed by so-called what's what I'm looking for? Harvesters. Because there was people that went legit and there was people that went illegit. And that's what I guess I'm saying is that the medical community has proven that legitimacy and illegitimacy completely run literally in their own spectrums apart from each other and totally connected to create the final product.
Right.
So it only makes sense that the final product of humanity as we know it is going to be a little bit of that, a little bit of that. And I'm talking, if the spectrum of pure evil is here and pure good is here, there's going to be a little bit of this, and 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 a little bit of this. And there's no other way around it. That's just how it's going to be.
So is it possible that there could have been a good way for Frankenstein to happen? Is there a way that story could have been, look, instead of staying up all night, every night on crystal meth, like shooting the beakers and the electricity and all that and doing all his experiments, what? Maybe he had more of a committee with more ethical practices. They passed it down, and then what? They're able to reanimate a corpse at the end of the day. Like the conceit of that was misguided from the start.
Well, in the Mary Shelley version of Frankenstein, is there a progression? Is there like a part where he like animates a finger and a toe and then a hand and then an arm and then like is what I'm saying is, did he just skip over a bunch of steps and go right for the throat?
I think so.
Because that would be the problem. I think it's like
I think they got to the part where the creature is alive pretty quick.
Yeah, I think if you look at the medical community, that was specifically happening in 17th and 18th and 19th and 20th century Europe. I'd say before 20th century, but specifically in that 19th and 18th century. During that time, there were legit doctors who were really trying to grasp medicine
What happened
and the human body and understand it.
As a machine type thing.
Yeah, I really think that those guys existed.
Yeah.
I think, though, the problem was that there were others that tried to skip over a bunch of steps. And that's where you get your snake oil salesmen.
But those guys
and your malpractice.
Those guys fade away, though. The ones that are doing it right, the things that they do end up sticking because they went about it the right way to where real progress happened. The ones that skipped steps and needed to push through and be a snake oil salesman and get their cut right now, they become, the thing of stories like a Frankenstein. Where it's
but the damage is done.
What is the damage, though?
Death.
What?
Being maimed, your mental facilities your mental faculties.
Okay, so like doing
there was horror.
Right.
There was horror. Mangala caused horror.
Right.
So those guys that tried to skip steps and just jump right over it, and gypsies that were selling shit that they just made up for $1, they're another example of someone that didn't like, oh well, I've been trying this for about 20 years and it was handed up, my grandmother showed me this and my aunt showed me this and this has worked really well for my family. It was just some guy who's like $50. And he drives off in his little horse and buggy, and the guy drops over dead 2 weeks later from the shit that he just sold him. And maybe what I'm saying is there's a lot of guys out there that maybe killed people they don't even know they killed people.
Right.
Because they were just so busy worried about the buck and so busy worried about jumping over the natural progression and moving forward and getting something out of it and being somewhere they didn't earn yet, that people got hurt for it. And that's medically, that's politically, that's what humans do. We get mad because it took 10 minutes at McDonald's instead of 5 because we want it now. We want to fix it now, and that the fact that we're getting even more and more acclimated to that ideal, to right now, even more than the past. I think it's pretty much inevitable that the natural progression is it's all going to come crashing.
Okay, but that's where the idea of the individual, that's where the individualism bites humanity in the ass right there, because you don't want to you don't want to stand on somebody's shoulders and have someone stand on your shoulders, and eventually in 5 generations some great feat of mankind has been found. You want it in your lifetime, you want to see it, you want to get credit for it, and not every culture on this planet is that way. There are some cultures that are more kind of symbiotic and more uniform,
Like-minded.
or more willing to do more long-term projects that might benefit everybody more than the one individual did. I hope that there's that it might not even be cultures, just mindsets. Let's say that mindset does exist, and I hope it has the chance to win out. Because I mean, there are plenty of medical stories of great people putting their full heart into doing wonderful things and really helping people. And so those good people of the medical world, hopefully, because now that I think
of the good ones out there with the bad.
now that I think about it, the happily ever after version of Frankenstein is not Frankenstein's monster. It's he did a little operation on a kid that had a bad knee, and the kid walked a little better.
Yeah.
The end.
That would sure make for a great movie.
The knee is
So-
alive.
Our Frankenstein movie is
He hits the kid on the knee with the rubber mallet,
Yep.
and the foot doesn't go up.
it's a 4.5 minute long feature film
And then
about everything working out.
it sounds like a great
And
story.
not great, but fine.
It's,
Everything works out fine.
it was fine. It's more of like a after the weather on the 10 o'clock news segment.
We'll call the movie Frankenfine, and we'll have a little mini feature in front of some other movie, and people walk out being like, "Everything worked out fine. That was fine." What did you think of the movie? It's fine.
Fine. There's no tension.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. All right. I think we've fixed the world's problems.
Clearly.
All right. Thank you so much for being here, Colin. Thank you so much for being here, Colin.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are the man. And y'all rock. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and put a comment down in the comment section. And y'all know the truth. And that's that all of this is diabolical.